All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our BFRDP grant writing webinar, How to Write a Strong USDA BFRDP Application. My name is Becky Hansen, and I'm the primary program specialist for BFRDP, along with my NIFA program colleagues, Dr. Dennis Ebadagi and Aisha Magruder. We also have some grants management specialists with us today, Steve Evans and William Mallett. And as we go through the presentation, we'll introduce ourselves as we go. We have a comprehensive webinar planned for you all today and hope to answer as many of your questions as we can. So the agenda for today is divided into three main parts: an introduction to the USDA BFRDP program, preparing your BFRDP application, and resources. We encourage you all to type your questions into the Q&A box throughout the presentation so that we can respond to them as they come in. And then we'll also have some time at the end of the presentation today to verbally address any additional questions. This is our USDA non-discrimination statement. This slide contains contact information for individuals with disabilities to request reasonable accommodations. It also has language access services that will be provided to limited English proficient individuals upon request. And it also contains that anyone wishing to file a complaint can utilize the phone number, fax number, or postal mailing address listed on the slide. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Dennis Ebadagi.
Thank you, Becca. This is Dennis Ebadagi. I'm the National Program Leader here for the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program. We do want to thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon. In getting started, we need to know what the primary goals are for this program. We want to be able to enter and or improve successes of farmers when they are in farming operations. And we would like to support their efforts in providing education, mentoring, and technical assistance for the individuals and farmers they are going to be training. And thirdly, we would like to ensure that they gain knowledge, skills, and tools that they need to sustain their farms for future generations. We have 14 legislative priorities that Congress put in place for us. Now, all these 14 are important depending on the goals you are setting for the individuals you're going to train. Some of the important ones that you have to have would be one of technical assistance, so farmers can acquire land from retiring farmers. Another one is marketing strategies, financial and risk management training, also you have mentoring, apprenticeships and internships, farm financial benchmarking, farm safety, food safety, and working with vocations and veteran farmers and ranchers. Those are all important. And the key in these efforts would be the fact that not only do you have those priorities, you have the Secretary's priorities, which are climate change, and also working to enhance USDA programs and services. When it comes to eligibility, if you are not an individual, if you're an individual that doesn't have LLC or 501c3, that is the only condition you cannot qualify. Otherwise, if you have an incorporation, you are qualified to apply to Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program. Now, there are exclusions here. If you have had a project submitted in the past and it was funded, and you are trying to submit that same proposal to us, we are going to reject it. And also, If you are submitting by yourself without working with organizations or collaborators, we cannot fund that proposal. And to meet geographical diversity, we cannot fund more than one project to one institution per year. So one institution can submit more than one, but we can only fund the most meritorious proposal. When it comes to the programs, which is right for me, you have to decide between yourself as the expert in the area, are the one you want to select. If you are new and you don't have much experience, the simplified standard is best. If you have the experience, you can go with any of the standards. And education team as well is one of those you can look into if you want to satisfy the gaps within the system. Now you have standard grants, which are large, medium, small, and you pick the one you would like based on your goals, the type of audience you're going to be serving, and you want to pick an ambitious plan that you can accomplish. Those are important. We have the simplified standard, which is for new trainers or trainees. And if you have less than 3 years of experience, this is the best one you want to pick. If you don't have experience and then you're asking for a large grant, that is going to be difficult. Education team grants, they help to fill the gaps that we have in the system. And also these ones are up to $750,000. Okay, Aisha, you are next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha Magruder. I am the secondary program specialist for BFRDP. And thank you all for being here today. And so I will be discussing some things that you to help you prepare for your application before you start. So there are 3 steps that's very important for you to complete before you start your application. Step 1 is to review solicitation. Please read the RFA thoroughly. It has all the important information that you need. That includes the deadlines to evaluation criteria. Step 2 is to determine your grant type. Select a grant type that aligns best with your project. And step 3 is registration. Prior to submission, it is required that you register and update your organization or entity on sam.gov and grants.gov. It's very important to do this early to prevent any last-minute panic. So when you're registering on sam.gov, you need to set up a SAM account to register your entity, and you can obtain your UEI number, which is a 12-digit identifier that you would need to do business with the federal government. And also every year you will need to go in and do updates as needed. And with grants.gov, you'll go on their website and click on the applicants tab, and you'll click on get registered. And the website will give you detailed instructions on how to complete that. And some points to remember for registering. This registering with sam.gov can take some time, especially there are issues with your registration that may affect your ability to apply before the funding opportunity close date. And if your entity is already registered, make sure that you are renewing and updating per their requirements. And to you, Becca.
Thanks, Aisha. Alrighty, so I'm going to go over some initial steps of how to build a strong BFRDP application. So maybe some of the initial questions that you may be asking yourself at this point are, what's included in a BFRDP award? When are our applications due? Who's eligible? How do I prepare and submit for funding? Along with some other questions here on the slides. And we want to emphasize that you'll find answers to all of these questions and more within the RFA. So one of the things we always say is to become a student of the RFA. Read this thoroughly. It's a very detailed document that contains everything that you will need to know for developing your proposal. This has the main goals of the program, detailed instructions of how to apply, and we also encourage you to read the NIFA grant application guide as well, which will assist you in your application. The structure of RFAs, they're split into 8 main parts. The funding opportunity description, award information, eligibility, which Dennis covered, application submission information, review requirements, award administration, and then other information. And there are some key elements to your BFRDP application. The required ones that are needed to get through the initial screening process, so are very important, are the summary or the abstract, the project narrative, the budget, and budget justification. Other items that are needed are key personnel bio sketches, your conflict of interest list for every project director and co-project director, current and pending support for every project director and co-project director, the data management plan, and the bibliography. So for the project summary, this is a succinct description of your proposal. It must be 250 words or less. And we encourage you to think about how to capture the reviewer's attention. This is the first thing that they're going to read, and include your objectives and your project outcomes. And we have some template resources for you as well that we'll also put in the chat. For your project narrative, for the standard grants and education team grants, these need to be a max of 20 pages. And for simplified standard grants, it's a max of 10 pages. This is really the bulk of your application, detailing those project priorities that your project aligns with, who your target audience is, what the problem is that you're wanting to address and why it's important, your goals, your anticipated outputs, and who's going to be involved in this project. If you are resubmitting a proposal, we want to make you aware that you did get your review comments back if you submitted, and you have the opportunity to respond to those reviewer comments in a 1-page resubmission response that is not included in that 20-page limit of your project narrative. So that should allow you to go in and address what the reviewer said in your previous proposal that was not funded. Some additional tips for the project narrative is to provide comprehensive information. As I said, this is what the reviewers are going to be looking for, to organize it accordingly with the RFA, and to make sure that it is detailing the evaluation criteria, which Dennis will go over later. And also, it's always helpful to have a second set of eyes with someone else who can review your project narrative before submitting. Just really briefly, as the awards management team will go into this a little bit later, the budget, to prepare your budget with a strong justification, to bear in mind those differences in funding amounts. So if you're applying for a simplified, that's going to have that max amount of $49,999, all the way up to those standard grants up to $750,000 per year, or sorry, for the whole project should be $750,000 for the 3 years of the project. Sorry about that typo. And then also to include $3,000 per award year for annual PD meeting travel. BFRDP awards also are required to provide a 25% match from non-federal sources in the form of cash or in-kind contributions, which we'll go into a little bit later. NIFA can waive this matching fund requirement if you are effectively reaching an underserved area or population. The only thing you need to do to request that waiver is to put at the top of your budget justification form, this applicant plans to serve an underserved area or population, and we would like to request the 25% match waiver. So that's all you need to do at this point when putting together your application. And then just some last additional forms to bear in mind: letters of support. Again, as I mentioned, those key personnel bio sketches, your budget justification, subcontract information, conflict of interest list for your PDs and co-PDs, and then that current and pending support for your PDs and co-PDs. And all of these, many of these forms have templates that you can find in the RFA. And with that, I will pass it over to Stephen Evans.
Hello, my name is Stephen Evans. I'm a grant management specialist from AMD. I'm joined with William Mallett. We work in an area that we handle the BFRD projects. So can I get the next slide, please? We're going to go over a short overview of what we're looking at. Mostly I'm going to be talking about items I've seen that will slow up your process in AMD. Next slide, please. So just as a little bit of information, once you do pass Dennis's in the program portion of this, when AMD is reviewing this, we're going to have a lot of information that we need to request from you. It's quite in depth and it is time consuming. So if you can start on that as soon as you can, some of this takes weeks to a month to get it all completed. Next slide. Here's some more information about what we'll be asking for. Can you go to the next slide? So one of the areas in the work process that over the years I've been doing this, I saw a lot of problems with is the current impending, as you were previously talking about or being told about. A lot of these are put in as a blank document and you do not include your time and effort for this award. So when you're completing that, make sure that you put every award you have with every agency plus this award as to what you expect to be spending on it. There is another area that we look at effort, and that is the budget. On the budget form, there is an effort that you'll be putting in. The difference between the current and pending effort and the budget effort is the current and pending effort must be equal to or greater than your budget effort. We look at these and it's one of the key points that everyone will look at when we process these. Next page, please. So you already have been told a little bit about matching, and BFRD has a minimum matching amount of 25%. The best advice I can give is if you can request that waiver and you have a reason for doing that, request the waiver. Matching becomes an additional point of extra work you're going to have to keep up on. And it can be quite in depth the more people you have doing matching. So if you're able to take a waiver, request the waiver, as Becca was telling you, put that in. And next page, and you will most likely be granted that waiver based off of what you are being served or who you're serving. In matching, we have several types. You can do cash matching, in-kind contribution, and third-party contribution matching. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of general information about matching. So next slide. When you're doing your matching, the budget will request the dollar amount that you're putting in. So you are basically putting that in. We will need a justification of the amount of matching. So if you have 4 matching sources on there, we will need to know the information for each matching source and how much they're going to be giving and what that money is going to be used for. Next page, please. For another area is the time committed on salaries. This is on the top part of the budget, and it asks for key personnel information. One of the areas that we see that is not filled out all the time, and we end up having to ask and slows the process down, is the base salary for a key personnel is left off, or the budget effort is left off of the award. So those are two key areas on your budget that you want to make sure that you complete, because if not, we will be asking for it to make sure that we have the information we need. Next slide. For your subawards, it is best to send in a letter of commitment and statement of work for what each subaward is, a budget and a budget narrative. So if you have 3 subawards, then you should end up having 3 budget narratives, 3 budgets, 3 letter of commitments, and statements of work, 1 for each of them. We have to know who you're sending the money to, so please include those in there. Next slide. On a consultant, there's a couple pieces of information we need. We need to know who the consultant is. In the budget justification, you're going to have to put what they're going to be doing for the money you're paying them. But we also need to know their rate of pay and number of hours they expect to work. If you miss any one of those, we'll be requesting that, and it will slow the process down. The big key things here is the name, the rate of pay, and the number of hours that they'll be working. So that is something that I would highly encourage looking at. Next slide. Equipment is just not really done with this project. So next slide. For meeting spaces, basically we need to know the cost of the meeting space. If you can also put in your budget justification of why you need this extra space. Was there no space where you were working at? That just helps us along in the process. Next slide. Land rent, it's a very simple portion here. Also, we need to just know the fair value of that land that's going to be rented. So if you are getting land rental, please include the fair value of that for us. Next slide. Indirect cost. So on indirect cost, an indirect is basically your utilities, your janitorial, accounting, your sanitation. Something is not directly to the project, but is something needed. So next slide. On indirects, the program has a cap put on by legislation that is 10% of total federal funds. And in NIFA AMD, we take the lowest of the IDC amounts, which means if you are a university, you would have an approved NICRA. So we'll take the lower of the 10% or the approved NICRA. If you are a nonprofit that does not have a NICRA, we'll end up using the 10% de minimis rate. So we'll take the lower of a 10% total federal funds or 10% de minimis rate. Next slide. Just some general information about it. It is 10% still right now. So if you need any information about indirect costs, you can find that at the website provided. Next slide. Here is our email and phone number if you need to contact us to ask a question. Feel free. We field BFRD questions all the time, so it's nothing new to us. And I will now pass this on. I believe Dennis, you're taking over, right? I can't hear you, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. Now, when it comes to evaluation criteria, you're going to see them in the request for applications. And it's very important that you follow this trend here and ensure that the reviewers really know where you are placing this in the application. Because the more difficult you make it for the reviewers, the more difficult it is for them to give you a good score. So all these are in the request for applications. Now, these ones are specific to the simplified. Now, the major difference here is that for the simplified, you don't have to have an external evaluator, whereas for the standard, you do. And these are 10 pages long, whereas the standard is 20 pages long. Okay, Aisha, back to you.
All righty, so I will give you all other key information that should be helpful for you all. All right, so formatting is very important when you're applying. All forms must be in PDF format. And these are a list of the criteria that's in the requirements, and they will all be listed in your RFA. And we have things such as the margins need to be 1 inch, the size of the font, line spacing, format, things of that will all be listed in the RFA. And to create a PDF, you will, in your Microsoft Word document, you'll click on File and scroll to the bottom and you'll see Save as Adobe PDF. And this is very important to adhere to, along with the other requirements. So the application award timeline with the RFA has already been released. So you can check out the website that we put in the chat for the RFA. Around April will be the proposal deadline to submit your application by 5 p.m. Eastern time. But we highly recommend that you all submit even a day before to eliminate any get confused with the time zones or technical issues that you may encounter. In June, July, reviews and award notification, we will be doing our NIFA peer review process. And then around September, if you are awarded, you can begin your BFRDP projects. And so this is what the review process looks like. Review is confidential peer review panel of experts. So they will take the time and review applications. And then a decision will be made, award decision sent with reviewer comments. And so 1 of 2 things could happen. You can not be funded or funded. So if you are not funded, you can resubmit, reapply during the next application cycle, and requirement is to be sure to include a 1-page response to review comments that you will receive. And if you are awarded, you can start conducting your projects with the funding that you received. And back to you, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you, Aisha. Now, things to remember. We have some flaws that we come across when proposals get to us. For example, sometimes we have a title that is too long and we have to cut it down with the approval of the project director. So with NIFA, no more than 144 characters. And another one here is on the form SF424. Sometimes we have an amount that is different from the amount in the budget form. So they need to be the same. And also we have a situation where the dollar requested is in 50 cents or 75 cents. Please make it whole. because our Awards Management Division does not fund projects with cents included. And when you calls for a logic model, please include one. And also the last one here, do not include applications that seek to conduct research because research is not allowable in BFRDP. Evaluation, as I mentioned earlier, third-party evaluator is required for all standard grants, not for simplified. Minimum set aside of 5% for funding veterans, and minimum for socially disadvantaged. These ones, programs do not need to meet this set aside. This is meant for us here in NIFA. So if you are funded for 750,000 and you want to allocate, say, 50,000 towards veterans, then say so in your proposal. You don't have to meet 5%. With legislative priorities, please ensure that you are not addressing everything because it doesn't help you to address everything. If that is what all your individual farmers you're trying to train need, then please say so. But it's best to have the ones that you know are going to be beneficial so you can train your farmers appropriately. And the most successful applications do contain land access, business and financial plans, farm production and marketing. These are the key ones we see in very good proposals and outstanding proposals as well. Now, when it comes to other common flaws, please do not submit recycled applications. Start it all over. And with letters of reference, if you are resubmitting, ask for new ones. With literature citations, you can include old citations, but include some newer ones. Those are very important. Now, do not involve partners that do not have the experience you need. That's important. And ensure that you are addressing the audience needs. And address the sustainability and ensure that you are putting down the pitfalls that that project may encounter. All projects do encounter pitfalls. And contribute to the clearinghouse if you are resubmitting, as well as plan to attend the project directors meetings. Now, when it comes to some common flaws, the last 2 years, we see that enhancing access to USDA programs and services and addressing climate change don't get addressed, yet they are in the request for applications. And when you don't address all the questions, that is not good because it doesn't help you to get funded. Then a common mistake we see with returning applicants who have vast experience is that when they report income, they don't report them in measurable outcomes. Yeah. Becca, next to you.
Thanks, Dennis. All right, so to close out some resources, and then we will open it up for questions and answer those live. So we have here some application preparation resources, including the NIFA grant application guide, which I talked about earlier, our USDA BFRDP website, and the RFA technical assistance webinar. And we will put those in the chat. Along with this, we have our NIFA data gateway, This provides a list of all previously funded BFRDP projects. So we really do encourage you to take a look at that. It has education team projects simplified all the way up to a large standard. So if you're wanting to see what's done previously to get an idea, making sure that you're not repeating what's already been done, we strongly encourage you to take a look at those. Additional resources, we always encourage you to reach out to us if you have questions. Dennis can definitely help with if your project fits the BFRDP program. And then also our BFRDP clearinghouse is at www.farmanswers.org. If you'd like to sign up for NIFA updates, we have a QR code here along with the website. And finally, here's our contact information for program contacts. So Dennis, myself, and Aisha, along with our BFRDP program website and program email. Before we move into Q&A, I just wanted to share that this is being recorded and the slides will be shared on the event page. So where you registered, that's where the recording and slides will be housed after this webinar. So please feel free to look back through all of those links that you're seeing throughout the presentation, trying to put as many as we can in the chat, but you'll also be able to click on those directly once those slides are posted after this webinar. So with that, we will move into some Q&A. And Aisha, would you like to read out the questions and then we can go from there?
Sure. All right, so the first question we have is, what is the financial assistance reps and search form and where can we find it?
What is the what?
What is the financial assistance reps and certification form and where can we find it? I think that was in Stephen's presentation.
The reps and certs form is within sam.gov. So when you're in there filling it out, there is one of the areas that actually says reps and certs that will need to be completed.
Okay. The next question is, are CMP only for federal funding?
Current and pending?
I'm not sure what they mean.
See,
I think that's for Stephen.
Yeah, current and pending. Is current and pending
So-
those forms only for federal funding?
So any person who's within the project, a project director, a CRO project director, PI, co-PI, those would have a current and pending. So if you've listed them as a key personnel in there and they have that, you want to include a current and pending.
Okay, next question is, what about consultants like lawyers who have rates above $93? I'm guessing that they're asking that allowed.
The amount for that. Oh, William, do you want to take this? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say they're gonna have to provide invoices from previous consulting jobs with other organizations just to show us that that is their normal rate of pay. And then we'll move on from there.
Okay. Is equipment an allowable line item in this grant opportunity?
Equipment is something that BFRD project normally does not have. It's educational, so you're not really buying farm equipment. That slide is something that is put in there, but we highly suggest not getting equipment and trying to put an application through with equipment in it. It's mostly going to be unallowable. So.
Okay. Can you use these funds to sub-award to growers, trainees using an RFP?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Neither do I.
I think if you're talking about mini grants, if you're wanting to award a mini grant to a grower or trainee, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, that's not allowable. If you're using that money to, if they're helping to train other beginning farmers and ranchers, then yes.
That's correct.
Maybe if they're helping to train, it's basically you're paying someone for being a teacher and educator. So
That's
it's
right.
not providing them a grant. They're doing services for you.
Right.
Yeah, this isn't a specifically like a loan program or a direct capital to BFRs. It's for training and education.
So Becca, I guess that answered this question. Do you offer assistance for disabled veterans and or minorities?
What kind of assistance? I mean, did they specify in the question?
No. So we'll give them a chance to elaborate on that one. So I'm gonna go to the next one. Do you need to apply with specific intended trainees identified, or can you have an application process to get people signed up for training after the grant is awarded?
Sure. Because in the process of putting your application together and getting it funded, you are recruiting. Even 3 months after you get funded, you are still recruiting. So it will take you a while to get all the individuals put together.
Okay. Can you please expound on the third-party evaluator requirement?
That's a very good question. A lot of times we have project directors who would decide to evaluate their own projects. And if I'm going to evaluate myself, 10 out of 10 times, I'm going to give myself 100% without a doubt. So it's always good to get someone external who will give you a non-biased evaluation.
Okay, thank you. Would a couple books for students be an allowable charge for equipment?
Books normally equipment that the government looks at is over $5,000. So books normally are not considered an equipment. If you're getting educational material for them, the pamphlets, that kind of stuff, that's a part of your award. But books, I don't know how they're getting it that high of a number, or they're not considered equipment.
All right. If not equipment, what are the most typical allowable costs?
Well, it goes all over the place. Normally salaries for the people working on the project. Consultants are the most likely considered your evaluators. Sub-awardees for anyone working with you. Materials and supplies, and there's an area for the participant support costs. So travel, training, and there's also travel to the BFRD PD meetings, which needs to be included.
Also, if you are buying seeds, fertilizers for demonstration, those are good investments.
Okay. Would funding for small equipment like irrigation pipes needed for an incubation space be allowable?
Steve, can I take that?
Sure, you can.
You can give your justification as to why you need it. But most of the time, Stephen is going to ask you, why can't you rent it? So if you can give a good justification as to why you can't rent it, then that might be a good way to allow you get it.
Okay. And just a quick reminder, please submit your questions in the Q&A box. Where I'm reading down from a list, so I'm gonna have to go back and forth to the chat to the Q&A. So please submit your questions there instead. All right, so next question is, does USDA provide one-on-one technical assistance support in writing the grant?
Okay, I think we were saying the other day, starting in March, we're going to have virtual office hours for about 2 hours, 2 or 3 days of the week. And you can ask us questions, but we are not going to help you write your proposal, if that is the question.
Yeah, just to expand on that too. So we do have an RFA technical assistance webinar that will be taking place February 21st. That link to register is directly in the RFA, so you can sign up there. And yeah, like Dennis mentioned, we'll also have some office hours coming out in the near future in March. So definitely look for those upcoming office hours. And the reason we don't do one-on-one support in writing the grant is just to be equitable to all of our participants. Unfortunately, there's a small number of us on the program team, so but we'll definitely do our best to answer any questions, via email or during those office hours.
Yeah, thank you, Becca. We can share the abstracts of all funded proposals since 2009. We can share those. We cannot share proposals. That is against policy, if that is helpful.
Okay. Are there caps for participant travel support?
There's not really a cap, but we are going to be looking over your budget justification to see what these funds are being used for. So I would be very detailed in what you're requesting, and so we can look at it and see if this is an ordinary necessary expense being used.
Okay. And this next question, I guess it was to elaborate on the assistance for veterans and minorities. I guess, Becca, you can say what you were saying earlier about this is not an individual grant alone. I think that's what they're meaning.
Yeah, and I think as Dennis mentioned as well, so 5% of funding from our program funds does go towards supporting veteran farmers. So yeah, that's definitely part of our program funding, is for those projects that are specifically helping veteran farmers. Anything else to add on that, Dennis?
No, thank you, Becca. Actually, what happens here is that this is a requirement from Congress. And we have to meet that every year. So for each year, we have met and surpassed veterans up to 10%. And then for socially disadvantaged refugees, immigrants, 30%. So we have surpassed those every year since 2014.
And I would say as well, I know there's a specific question about grants and loans for vet minorities. So this is not a loan program for veterans. If you are interested in that, please do reach out to me directly and I'll provide you with some resources, including your extension agents wherever you're located. So, and I'll put my, well, I guess my email and all of our emails are on these slides, but we'll also put our contact information in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Would this be equipment or supplies, example, IoT project to help with climate smart, such as moisture meters, water, solenoids, solar panel, etc.?
What is the cost?
They didn't say.
So Tony, in this for equipment and supplies, you have to remember that equipment is looked at as an amount over 5,000. But even within your supplies, if you're buying something that has a lifespan we're gonna want to ask a question or two about it. BFRD is also a educational program, so I'm having a hard time seeing, unless you're trying to train people on how to use these items. If that is it, then it would be, for training purposes, you could be, trying to buy us, and it would still be mostly a supply, unless it's over 5,000.
Thank you, Steve.
What part in the RFSI do you play a part in?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
What part in the RFSI do you play a part in?
I'm not
Maybe
sure I understand
in
the
the
question.
Q&A, maybe spell that out in the Q&A, the acronym, and we'll look back to that one.
Okay. We have current BFR grant that ends August 31st and may request a no-cost extension. If we do, are we eligible to apply for new funding for a distinct project in this round?
Very good question. If you go beyond 2024, you are not eligible to apply this round. You have to come back in 2025.
Okay. I believe I heard that only one project is approved in a region per year. If my clients are indigenous farmers across the entire US, how is the region defined within the scope of the grant?
No, that's not a correct statement. I apologize. I hope I did not misspeak. One project per organization or institution, not region.
Okay.
We want to meet the geographical distribution as set forth by Congress. So if you submit 2 or 3 proposals from one organization, we can only fund one. Otherwise, if we fund more than one, there are some that will not be able to get funded.
Okay. Can you go into more detail about participant support costs, stipends, housing allowance?
So participant support costs, just reading it straight off the budget. It has sections in it: tuition, stipend, travel, substance, and other. And we asked what and how many participants you have training in this. So it's basically a little bit different for each award that's coming through. Housing is really not something that I know if I've never seen asked. So that might be something I would definitely, if I saw, look into that, wanting to know why you're needing housing allowance.
We don't.
Yeah, so right there is something that is something you want to look at. If you're having a question on that, you can email, we can talk later, but yeah, so tuition for, any seminars that you're sending participants to, stipends for their time there, travel for when they're at that seminar, items like that are what participants' work cost is.
Okay. Can you share more about what kinds of, I think you answered this, what kinds of participant costs are common or allowable?
Yeah, I kind of just went through the list just right now, so.
Okay. Do programs need to serve a certain number of beginning farmers to be eligible?
No. Just no matter how many you can serve.
Add to that too, if I may, detailing in your application who you're serving and the funds you need to serve them needs to be outlined. So if you're planning to serve, 20 farmers, how are the funds going to be allocated for that versus 100 beginning farmers, there's probably going to be a difference in the amount that you're requesting. And that kind of also depends on the small, medium, or large standard grants. We have a difference in those sizes to kind of accommodate for the scope of your project. So being able to detail that really clearly within your application is what's important.
Yeah, thank you, Becca.
Is there a salary cap for the key representatives of the program?
There's not really a cap, but I can tell you that if you have a very high salary, it's something that will be looked at, and we'll be asking a lot of questions in on this. Dennis, do you have anything to add on that? I mean,
Well, thank you, Steve, for asking. When you have a very high salary cap, that is not very good for reviewers. That's a turn off. So you have to justify it if you really have to have a high salary. I mean, I think if you have maybe 1 or 2 instructors as opposed to having 5, and those 2 are going to do the work of 5 people, maybe you can justify it that way. But if you're going to have 1 person and pay the individual $400,000 a year out of 750, I mean, unless the person is on the road 24/7, maybe you can justify that.
Next question is, with third-party evaluation, would having program participants, beginning farmers, answer evaluations count as third-party evaluation? Or does a BFRDP applicant need to hire a consultant expert to do an evaluation of the whole 3-year program?
You hire someone you are comfortable with, who you can work with, and give you a good result. That is what is important.
Okay. Are there any specific criteria or regulations for travel expenses? For example, can you use Airbnbs for lodging?
I don't see why not, Steve.
yeah, there's no specific criteria. An Airbnb is basically a hotel, so you're paying to stay there just as you would be at a hotel. So no specific criteria for that.
Okay. Can I use project funds to pay wages to begin farmers who will be working at incubator farms for hands-on experiences? No payments for attending workshops, of course.
That's a tricky one. You can pay them wages if they are learning, if they are apprentice. Stephen, any additions to those?
Honestly, on this one, I would prefer that you contact one of us and we answer the question off the chat. This is it's a little bit longer conversation about getting to the right answer for you, and definitely like to be able to help you with this.
Okay, something was mentioned about traveling to training. I guess they want you to elaborate on that.
It's not uncommon for you to have training sites or go to a seminar, or you have different areas that you're going to for training. This is all part of the work you're going to be doing. I'm not sure what you're looking for with that, but just be specific in your budget justification of what you're doing and where you're going, and hopefully we'll have very few questions to ask before that.
All right, do you have a rule of thumb to categorize standard projects such as medium versus large? What criteria are being used, such as number of farmers trained, number of sites addressed, etc.?
They are all specified in the RFA. And the key is the scope of work. That's very important. And you want to be able to gauge the number of people you're going to work with. What kind of experience do they have coming in? What type of experience you need to impact on them before they leave. Because the two goals we have there, you want to train these farmers so they can go out there and establish their own farms and have their own farm enterprises, or go out there, enhance their skills and tools so they can sustain their farms for future generations. Those are very important.
Okay, on the geographic distribution, if one organization with one that's 501c3 has multiple locations around the country in 7 different states, can they be eligible for more than one project?
Very good question. Excellent question. If you have the same UEI, unique entity identifier, you will not be eligible. If you have different ones, yes.
Okay. If after we formulate our budget, is it possible to meet with a USDA BFRDP staff to ensure that it is allowable prior to submission?
I would defer that to Stephen and William. We don't do that from programs.
Yeah, normally we don't look at them prior to your submission. The problem that we would be facing is someone may say that we're giving you a leg up. If you have any questions though that you may think is questionable, you can email us, write it down and say, my project has this in it and I was working on the budget. I needed to know if that would be allowable or unallowable, or is this the correct area to put it in my budget? That's, fine question, but sending me the entire budget is, it goes a little bit too far on this, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. As a follow-up, we can look over a project summary, but not a proposal from the program side.
It is stated that the simplified a max of 49,000 is recommended for first-time applicants. But what if you have been doing training for a couple of years, but it's the first time applying to BFRDP?
You can apply for more if you feel comfortable handling it. It's entirely your choice.
I would also, just to clarify, the max for simplified standard grants are under 50,000. So 49,000 was put in as a a general amount, just to make sure you don't go over that 50,000.
Okay. What do you consider a high salary?
For our area, it just honestly, it's a very hard question to say what is it without having more information. I would say email us and we talk this through, but there is a executive salary cap which we have to look at to see how high your salary is compared to that. But without having more information than this, it's a very hard question to answer. Please just email me and we can talk this out and I'll try to help you out.
Yeah, if I may add to that, Stephen, when you have a situation where most of the funds go to salary and you don't have adequate funds for programs, then you are in trouble.
Okay. Can you please elaborate more on the educational track specifically?
Educational team grants. correct?
I guess that's what they mean, yeah.
Okay. You know, we have education team grants proposals. We have standard. Then we have a curriculum and training clearinghouse, which is not being computed for this year. That's once every 3 years. So for the education team, that one is designed to address gaps in the programs. So for the individual that is asking that question, if you can send us an email, we can send you a list of all the education team grants, the abstracts that have been funded. That way you can cross-check and ensure that what you're trying to do hasn't been done in the past. And that way you are helping to fill the gap that would assist in training the trainers, because the key here is that for an education team grant, if you do it in just one county, that's not helpful. Multi-counties, state, multi-state, region, yes. And it's to fill the gaps that exist within the programs.
Just to add to that as well, within the RFA, there's a thorough description of what we mean by education team and what Dennis has just outlined as well. And also within the evaluation criteria, there's a couple extra items for evaluation for education team grants. So the rationale for the geographic area, topic, or appropriate focus of the team, and also making sure there's a clear plan described to identify gaps in BFR training, evaluating all existing programs, as Dennis has said, what's already been done for education team grants, and then also that conducting the train the trainer projects. So do take a look at the RFA for those couple other items in the evaluation criteria for education team grants.
Can you request funding for staff professional development in addition to the 3,000 for the annual PD meeting?
I don't see any problem with that, Stephen.
Sorry, I was on mute. If you're continuing the development of someone who is already a professional at this, I see no problem with that. If you're trying to train a trainer that you just hired, there might be a few more questions as to why you're just not hiring someone who knows what they already are supposed to be doing.
Good point.
Can hydroponic indoor operations qualify?
It's not a situation whether it's qualified, but if that's why you're going to be training your individuals, that is fine. That's an expensive undertaking, but if that's what the individuals you're going to be training would like to learn, that is fine.
Okay. If the project is somewhat different from a previous unsuccessful submission, should we just submit a new project or still treat it as a resubmission?
That's entirely up to you and your team. Because if you have major changes to make, you submit a new proposal. If you don't have major changes, then you resubmit. And please look at the new request for applications. Don't just go by the application from the year you submitted, because things do change.
Just to add to that as well, if it is a project with different objectives from the one that you submitted before, that's definitely a key reason to submit it as a new project. If the objectives are exactly the same, then it probably would be a resubmission. But like Dennis said, up to you, and depending on how you're actually formulating your proposal.
Are beginning farmer apprentices allowed to participate in research projects that are already happening on the farm if they are not leading those projects?
There's no research in beginning farmer and rancher development program. So I'm not sure exactly how they can get involved in research if it's for training and technical assistance.
Okay. Can YouTube be served as a medium for education?
I don't see why not. If there's something that you want to teach them.
Okay. If you apply for $750,000 and BFRDP feel the award should be less based on the proposal, will there be an award given for less?
Do you mind repeating that question?
If you apply for $750,000 and BFRDP feels that the award should be less based on the proposal, would there be an award given for less?
Well, that's a very good question. The reviewer has to make a suggestion and then get back to you and say, well, what you are asking for really doesn't deserve 750,000, but this is a recommendation, and then they will leave it up to program to decide on how to go forward. But if you have a meritorious proposal, then the reviewers will give you a nod, and suggestions can be made as to how much you can be funded.
Okay. Well, that was the last question. Becca had answered some questions virtually in the Q&A and in the chat. So I'll turn back over to Becca.
Yeah, thanks, Aisha. Yes, so yeah, just to clarify, this webinar is being recorded and then the slides will be posted to the event page. So the same place where you registered for the event. I'm also putting in the chat here our RFA and technical assistance webinar that's going to be coming up on February 21st. That's a Wednesday. Actually, same time as this one, it'll be an hour and a half. And even more time for questions and answers for you all. We would encourage you in the meantime between this webinar and that one to take a look at the RFA. It's already been posted. It's out and available for you to start looking at, start building your applications now. And we do encourage you to, start working with your partners, collaborating, putting together your objectives, those expected outputs, and how those are going to be measurable. And we will definitely look forward to seeing hopefully many of you at our next webinar. Dennis or Stephen, do you all have anything to add?
Yeah, actually I do. If you need to visit with us, please send us email and we can set up a time for about 20 to 30 minutes. And also, one point I wanted to bring up, I have had questions where some of the applicants want to work with Mexico or Canada. This program, by legislation, allows you to work within the US territories or with the United States as a country, but not international countries.
From AMD side, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Our emails are sitting in the chat right now. We'll try to work to help you get everything answered.
Aisha, William?
No, I don't have anything. Thank you everyone for coming.
Nothing for me. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Becca, Aisha, Stephen, William, and all our panelists, all our attendees, not panelists, but all our attendees, we do appreciate the time you've taken to join us this afternoon. And please feel free to ask questions anytime, and they will respond, day or night, and I mean that. Becca,
you.
back to you.
Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.